the Buddha had back pain. Some of you may know that. And I too have struggled and lived with back pain on and off for about 30 years or so. Sometimes it really flares. I have to kind of be always attending to it. About 5 years ago, it really got bad and I was in pain a lot of the time. I was able to get surgery that helped a lot, which was great, even though I haven't fully been able to return to the kind of activity I used to be able to do, but it was stable. And then about a month ago, a new permutation of that lower back pain just came on in. And we've been working with the 8 worldly winds this month. And this was certainly an opportunity for me to notice how I relate to and work with pain. In the Lokavipatu Sutta, the Buddha teaches about the 8 worldly winds, about pleasure and pain, gain and loss, fame and disrepute, praise and blame. Bill and Susan and other teachers with them have been really focusing on this. And I wanted to read a little bit from that sutta. In it, he talks about how the uninstructed person relates to these worldly winds. And then he talks about how the instructed disciple, which I'm including all of us in that, relates to the 8 worldly winds. And I wanted to just read the section where he talks about pain and pleasure. Pain arises. He reflects, pain has arisen for me. It is inconstant, stressful, and subject to change. He discerns it as it actually is. His mind does not remain consumed with the pain. He does not welcome the arisen pleasure or rebel against the arisen pain. As he thus abandons welcoming and rebelling, he is released from birth, aging, and death, from sorrows, lamentations, pains, distresses, and despairs. He is released, I tell you, from suffering. And I really appreciate so many aspects of this teaching. One, the simplicity of pain arises, right? We can't escape it. We can't really ever get to a place where the 8 worldly winds are not coming or going. I appreciate the inclusion of stressful. It's inconstant, stressful, and subject to change. Just that acknowledgement helps me of, it is stressful, just on its own, just as it is. And then I love those words, welcoming and rebelling. I do think it's true. We really can rebel against how things are, against these 8 worldly winds. And this is a teaching on equanimity, right? The sutta, the 8 worldly winds, point us toward equanimity. And equanimity is that deep peace and acceptance and alignment with how things really are, with the Dhamma, with the truth of impermanence, with the truth of dukkha, or that things are so unreliable because of that impermanence, and with the truth that no thing exists separately on its own, no self. And I'm sure all of you have had moments of really feeling equanimity, and it feels so good. It really is that freedom, the ending, the cessation of that tension, of clinging, of rebelling that we so often move through our lives with. But we can't force it. We can't force equanimity and acceptance. I remember a couple years ago, just before my surgery, I was at a day-long at Susan and Bill's house. I was in a lot of pain. I was not in the best mood. I was talking about trying to be mindful of it, trying to be compassionate toward myself. And Susan, in her Susan way, pointed out that actually I wasn't being truly mindful and I wasn't actually being compassionate. Everything I was doing was conditional. I was bargaining with the pain. saying, I'll be with it, I'll be mindful of you if you go away really fast. I'll be compassionate toward this body if you change really fast. And I remember being really mad in that way that you get really mad when someone says something that you know is true, but you sort of don't really want to hear it. But it was really important for me. And my back pain has been a real teacher for me in that way, really shining a light on all those ways that I am not enlightened yet, all the ways that I am not equanimous very often. And I have to see that. It's part of my practice. I think that there are these conditioned ways, deeply conditioned ways, that we each rebel against the 8 worldly winds. And you may already know what yours are. Mine, as Susan kind of showed me, I bargain a lot. I think deep down that I can really control it. If I just work hard enough, if I just push a little harder, I take it to be me and mine. I identify with it a lot. All of that additional lamentation and mental distress that's talked about in the sutta. At the end of this summer, I went to the beach and I was really looking forward to it. I wanted to get in the water. I live in Massachusetts, so there's not that many days that it's warm enough to do so. And the water was so rough. I kind of tried to get in very, very gently, and within a matter of seconds was smashed to the ground. Guy next to me, we were joking about how rough it was, and he's like, I'm going to get in, I'm going to get in, I'm going to do it. And less than a second, he was smashed to the ground, barely got up before the undertow was pulling him back. It was impossible to get in without risking injury or worse. And then I would kind of go back to my little chair on the beach, maybe 40, 50 feet back, and I'd look at the waves and I'd be like, they're not that big. I can get in. I can get in. Look at them. And I'd walk up and, massive. I think this is often how the 8 worldly winds feel, how the practice of equanimity is. Sometimes it's just, there's so much that gets added and it feels so hard to ride the waves and be with it. Jesse Masio Vega Frey is a teacher from Hawaii, and he talks about this sometimes. He talks about living in a place where there are tidal waves all the time, and there are signs that say where to seek higher ground. And he uses that as an encouragement that sometimes we do need to seek higher ground. Sometimes we are kind of outmatched. We can't fully be mindful or equanimous. And again, this is part of how we cultivate equanimity. We sometimes seek higher ground. We brighten up the holding environment. I care. I turn with caring attention toward the places in me that are rebelling, not accepting, fighting. Because that's what's predominant usually in those moments. Elizabeth Gilbert talks about a moment in her meditation practice where she has this sort of vision of being at the beach, and her teacher's teacher is pointing at the waves. And he says, make that stop. Make that stop. And she's like writing and trying everything, bringing everything she's learned about meditation and the Dharma. Nothing's working. And she's trying harder and getting more and more distressed. And the teacher looks at her and laughs. Ha 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 ha. You really think you can stop that? I know that there are places in me that really think I can stop it. This is my deepest conditioning, what I come up against, part of my practice of cultivating equanimity. And I have to be so kind to that rebelling one that is trying so furiously just to make it stop. And if I keep caring for that and noticing the energy of that, I have a chance of coming back to the shore, seeing if I can get in a little bit. If the pain can then just be pain, if I can discern it as it actually is, like the sutta says. Sensations in the body, coming, going, inconstant, stressful. So I want to end with a poem by Ryokan. He was a Japanese monk and poet who lived from 1758 to 1831. And my invitation is to hear this not as bleak, but actually as a hopeful teaching on the 8 worldly winds. No luck today on my mendicant rounds. From village to village, I dragged myself. At sunset, I find myself with miles of mountains between me and my hut. The wind tears at my frail body, and my little bowl looks so forlorn. Yes, this is my chosen path that guides me through disappointment and pain, cold and hunger. Thank you for your caring attention.